Welcome to the Economy Magazine. I'm Binyamin, Tjong-Alvares with economic news of the day. We look today at female participation in the workforce in both the developing and the developed world. We go first to Mozambique, where women mostly work in the landfills of Maputo, the capital, and take you to the Israeli defense industry, where women have slowly moved to the top. First, today's headlines. Crude oil futures slumped further on Wednesday as another surge in U.S. oil supply weighed on oil prices. On the New York Mercantile Exchange, light sweet crude futures for delivery in March traded at $45.47 a barrel in morning trade. Brent crude for March delivery fell to $48.98 a barrel in London's ICE Futures Exchange. Though the U.S. oil rig count has fallen from 1,600 in September to 1,370 recently, U.S. oil production growth has not slowed down. The American Petroleum Institute on Tuesday announced an increase by 12.7 million barrels in weekly U.S. oil inventories. Greece named radical left-wing economist Yanis Varoufakis its new finance minister. Varoufakis is a vocal critic of the conditions imposed on Greece in return for the bailout granted in 2010. His appointment on Tuesday indicates Greece will take a hard line in haggling over the €240 billion EU-IMF package. The new anti-austerity government wants the immediate release of a €1.2 billion package to increase the minimum wage and pensions for the poorest. And though the EU and IMF have indicated their willingness to resume discussions, debt write-offs are not likely for now.
Everything is so open to discussion. Europe has to decide whether it's a democratic Europe that can incorporate democratic changes in member states. If it can't do that, then it's in an even worse situation than we think. But I don't think that is the case. I think it is a democratic Europe, and a democratic Europe needs to listen to the people when they have spoken. And in Greece, they have spoken.
And while the people in Greece have spoken through the elections, International Monetary Fund Chief Christine Lagarde still stresses the need for in-depth reforms.
As you can imagine, the IMF stands ready to resume discussions and negotiations with the Greek authorities. And I'll leave it at that point because it's now for the discussions to take place.
Apple in the fourth quarter reported the largest net income of any public company in history, beating forecasts. S&P Dow Jones indices showed Apple's net profit grew 37% to $18 billion, topping ExxonMobil's previous quarterly record of $15.9 billion in 2012. iPhone sales jumped 46% over the prior year, driven by the highest number of first-time buyers since the smartphone launched in 2007. Surging demand in China for the latest iPhones saw sales of the smartphone there double, driving revenues 70% higher to $16.1 billion. But for now, iPhone's biggest market remains the U.S. Ghana signed landmark power and energy agreements to ensure it meets the energy needs of industrial and domestic users. Ghana on Wednesday signed a deal with American energy giant General Electric for the production of the single largest power source in Ghana's history. The Ghana 1,000 megawatt project, which is a gas-powered thermal plant, is expected to be completed over the next 5 years. On Tuesday, Ghana signed with energy firms ENI and Vitol for the production of about 180 million cubic feet of gas.
And I'm absolutely delighted, after starting this project way back in 2007 and 2008, that it is beginning to become something which will genuinely happen for all Ghanaians and indeed for ENI and for Vitol. We've had tremendous support from the government, from GMPC, and indeed from His Excellency the President, which we really do appreciate. Now we have to get on and make it happen. And with your commitment, sir, and your agreement, we will ensure that this is a very successful project for this country.
Yahoo plans to spin off its $40 billion stake in Chinese e-commerce group Alibaba in what it says will be a tax-free transaction. The Alibaba stake makes up the majority of Yahoo's $47 billion equity value. The internet company will split into two, one containing Yahoo's remaining 15% holding in Alibaba and the other owning Yahoo's operating business and its stake in Yahoo Japan. Alibaba is likely to buy back the shares as the spin-off could create a parallel shadow market of its U.S.-listed shares over which it would have little control. Dire poverty has led hundreds of women and children in Mozambique to spend their lives sifting through the rubbish at a landfill in the capital Maputo. 22 years after the end of a civil war that ruined the economy, Mozambique still ranks 178th out of 187 countries on the United Nations Annual Human Development Index.
For 10 years, Rosa has worked at the Huleni rubbish dump in Maputo, the capital of Mozambique. Like the 500 other catadores or collectors in Portuguese, she looks for plastic, paper, cans and bottles, anything she can sell.
I'm here because of poverty, because I have nothing for my kids. I need to give them something.
When the site was chosen by Mozambique's Portuguese colonial rulers 50 years ago, the dump was well outside the city's limits. But Maputo has since overtaken it. Now the waste is spread over an area the size of 17 football fields, piled as high as a 3-story building, and surrounded by residential zones. These women and children who have no other way of earning a living do what they can to protect themselves from the acrid fumes given off.
When I was put in charge of the dump by the city council 5 years ago, few children were working here. Now the numbers are evening out. There are almost as many as the adults. More than 900 tons of waste are dumped here daily. Those trucks coming from the wealthier areas of the city are the most sought after by the catadores. Hard and dirty work that pays about $50 a day, while nationally the economy is doing well, expected to grow by more than 7% this year.
My life is one of suffering. I don't have any alternative. If I didn't do any work, I would have nothing for my children.
For me, the most difficult thing here is hunger.
After several hours spent at the dump, Rosa goes back to her home nearby. And while more hands would mean more money, she doesn't want her children to follow her lead.
I don't see a future for the kids because they don't have money. The money from selling these things is very little.
For years, authorities have been talking about moving the landfill to a site 20 kilometers away. For Maputo's catadores, that could put an end to their only hope of making a living.
Over now to women in the developed world, where positions in once male-dominated fields have gradually become available to their highly educated female counterparts. Women currently hold a little over 4% of the Fortune 500 CEO positions. However, in the U.S. defense industry, women are at the helm of nearly 50% of the largest firms. The following report takes a look at women in the Israeli defense industry, where they are equally required to serve.
If this image appears trivial to you, it means that things are changing. Not so long ago, women in the defense industry were a rare phenomena. But these days, we see more and more women like Isabel Okashi.
It's a robot that carries equipment and follows the soldier. It takes all the heavy equipment. Sometimes you feel like the fact that you're a woman is not fully respected in this very manly environment. But you ignore that and proceed.
Isabel Okashi heads the robotics department of Israel Aerospace Industry.
I was not looked at differently because I'm a woman. I led a project for landmine discovery in the European R&D that combined a number of sensors, electro-optics, electromagnetic, and a ground-penetrating radar. We built an amazing system for demonstration abroad.
Here you see the pins of the battery. We will assemble everything and get the battery that produces a great deal of voltage when it works. And it actually enables the missile to work, reach its destination, and carry out the task.
Avital Ophir heads one of the factories of Rafael Advanced Defense Systems, responsible for developing anti-missile defense, such as the Iron Dome.
Managing workers is like running a family, a household, like a mother. Women bring with them a circular and inclusive management style that is much more pleasant and achieves better results.
Miri Kaufman, Sales and Business Development Manager at Magal, who works in developing cyber protection against computer hacking, goes a step further.
I sometimes use the fact that I'm a woman to advance my goals, which are the company's goals, of course.
Has gender been erased off the equation, giving way to talent and professionalism? After all, these are still defense industries manned by a regular surge of former IDF officers, bringing with them a management style that often excludes women.
I remember in the past, and in this position in particular, being a woman running a factory, I was unique. Today there is another woman, and I don't feel that special. I'm happy to pave the road.
Female technicians and engineers have been working on assembly lines since World War II, but while the number of executives is growing, it's far from balanced. In Israel, less than 20% of executives are women.
It's a man's club, but I think we can fit in and have our additional value and unique perspective. There's no reason why we shouldn't succeed.
How is it to work in a surrounding that is considered very masculine, even chauvinistic?
Military people's talk is a language you need to learn to speak, like I learned Hebrew when I came to Israel, or learned physics terminology studying in physics.
How do you handle the speech and behavior?
I don't get excited. They're probably the insecure ones. I have enough confidence.
In all of them, the desire to succeed transcends the personal. They all work to promote and encourage women towards science and technology, touring schools and hosting students in the factories.
Nowadays, we see a bit more software engineers, more mechanical engineers, but the infrastructure is still lacking. We don't see them in the industry yet. Caracal Brigade girls that I admire for what they do, we don't see them yet. They'll be the generation that makes the difference.
If we keep encouraging girls to study technological professions, they will enter naturally. After that, managing is definitely feminine.
We need to open the door and say, come in, we want you here, and we believe you can succeed.
I-24 News editor Karen Kirsch joins us now in the studio to discuss female participation in the workforce of developing and developed economies. Ms. Kirsch, thanks for joining us.
Hi, Binyamin. How are you?
Good.
Well, as you see, the data you mentioned before, about 50% in the defense industries in the U.S., right. I think that's pretty much a fluke.
Yeah.
Because when we look at the bigger data, women make up 70% of the world's poor population, and they also participate in the workforce in about 70%.
Wasn't there recently, though, a World Bank study that showed that high female participation in developing countries actually infers poverty, which is unbelievable?
Yes, and that's actually it's a U-shaped participation in the workforce. It actually the poor women, they work because they have to.
Right.
And because it's exactly that, and they have to. They don't have any other kind of social security or social protection or social support. They work simply because it's food, and it's food for them and food for their children. It's really, really very much the basic one. And then we kind of have a sort of, participation goes down in the more, I would say, central kind of semi-developed countries and developed countries, and it goes further up in more highly educated countries where you have better technology, better household services that you can buy if you want to participate in the workforce.
Of course, the issue with education also, there has to be jobs there for the women to actually go into. I mean,
of course, and what we see in poor places like we saw in the story about Mozambique is that women tend to take up informal employment, which is not registered anywhere. It doesn't go into any kind of GDP measurement. It definitely doesn't amount to any kind of proper money, proper paycheck, social benefits. It's really nothing of that kind. And women do tend to be the ones who participate in this kind of workforce.
So in conclusion, I mean, where do you see this going? What needs to be done?
Well, as we can see all across the board that the UN and foundations actually go to women in the poor places and invest in microfinancing of women businesses and women-owned, because they do understand that this is, when you solve women's employment and women's poverty, that's going to be one of the choices, one of the solutions for the bigger problem.
Karen Kirsch, thanks for joining us on the show. All right, well, that is the end of the Economy Magazine for today. I'm Binyamin Tjong-Alvares. Thanks for watching us, and join us again tomorrow for more on the economy.